Hi guys, week 21. We're deep into Solomon's life now. So this is when it starts to get really good because Solomon is another super messy guy. So I wanted to just touch off the very first part of this week. It was the first story that you read. Story of two prostitutes. It's a tale of two painted ladies. Why is the first evidence of Solomon's wisdom a story of two prostitutes? What's going on there? Because he asked God for wisdom, and God blesses him and says, I'm going to give you this kind of wisdom. I'm going to bless you in this many ways. And suddenly there's just this like veer off into left field with these two prostitutes and this baby that everybody wants. And it just gets crazy. So what's going on? Well, there are so many ways that God could have tested Solomon's wisdom. It would have been really impressive to the people if he had solved a treaty between two nations. It would have been super flashy and just amazing if he had done this incredible thing and this made a huge invention that just blew everybody's minds. You know, if he had won a battle in an incredible way, everybody would have been impressed by that. But is wisdom true wisdom if it only applies to the great and mighty? One of the things that we see here is that the first test of Solomon's wisdom is how does he treat the least important people in his kingdom? You have two women that literally no one cares about, and they've come to the king with a problem over one of their babies. Nobody knows who these babies are. Nobody knows who their fathers are. They're prostitutes. No one cares about these ladies. Solomon's first show of wisdom is in settling things between these two prostitutes. Why? Because if wisdom isn't good for the least and the lowest, if it doesn't help you to know how to treat the people who everyone ignores, then it's not really wisdom. It's not really from God. And that's what you see later on in James when it talks about wisdom and it talks about treatment of the poor, treatment of the needy, and just how do we see one another as people? Do we view some people as more important because they're wealthy and some people as less important because they're not? True wisdom is good for the least as well as the greatest. So I hope that's helpful. Observation out of 1 Kings 5. David has had a really excellent relationship with Hiram, king of Tyre, and he leaves that relationship to his son. And you see more of where David is trying to help Solomon succeed. And you also see the importance of leaving good relationships for other people. You know, that's just something that's so important in our lives. Everything is about relationships in our lives. And so David has really excellent relationship with this guy, and we see that that's part of the legacy that he leaves to Solomon that's going to help Solomon succeed in building the temple. And that sets me up for another thing. We start to see some real inconsistencies in Solomon's life, some giant incongruities. And this is a trend that you see in him and what he is loving and how that affects his priorities and his treatment of people. In 1 Kings 6:38 and then 7:1, we see that it takes Solomon 7 years to build the temple, 13 years to build his own house. When we had looked at the story of Deuteronomy 17 and the 5 requirements for the king, God was dealing with 3 obsessions of humanity, which are sex, money, and power. And we see that Solomon, immediately after he starts to get powerful, he starts to enmesh himself more and more in more power, more money, more sex. And that's what's going on in his life. And so you see, he takes 7 years to build God's temple, 13 years to build his own house. It begins to foreshadow part of his priorities as a person. In 1 Kings 9:10 through 14, I've wondered about this story for a long time. Solomon gives Hiram, king of Tyre, a group of cities. Hiram goes and inspects them, and he comes back and he says, those cities were cobble. They were worthless. Why did you give me these cities? What's going on? Are they genuinely worthless, or what's happening here? I think Solomon repaid Hiram's generosity by giving him a bad gift. And it goes more and more into Solomon's priority of power and money and wealth. He started to see other people as objects to be used. He's not grateful. He's not giving a good gift in response. And so he starts to take this relationship that David had left in with Hiram, and he starts just to treat it like it's not a priority. In 1 Kings 9:15 through 28, you see that he starts to use forced labor He enters these massive building projects, and the next thing we see is that he starts to sort of press gang Israelites, but that's not permanent. What he really starts to do is he starts to force foreigners to work for him, and it is a permanent institutionalized slavery. It's one of the reasons, perhaps, that Saul became the richest king that ever lived. It wasn't necessarily because of the blessing of God, but God had offered him that blessing. It was also because he didn't pay his workers. And so you see this incongruency in the life of Solomon as he starts to see people more and more as objects that are going to get him more money. And we just know, like, we see it in all of our lives. People who love money use other people to get it. And that's some of what Solomon's doing. You also see that he marries first the princess of Egypt, which is consolidating power, having a powerful ally to the south, and also access to Egypt's horses and the money and everything that comes with that. And then also 699 other wives and 300 concubines. Why is he doing this? Well, there's the sex, but there's also the power. What kind of a man is this that has a harem of 1,000 women? What a powerful man. What a powerful man that has so many alliances with so many nations. What a wealthy man that he has all of these relationships with other nations and he's benefiting from them economically. And so you just start to see that as Solomon starts to compromise with sex and money and power, it takes over the rest of his life, and it shapes how he treats other people, it shapes his priorities as a king, and then it also shapes the future of the nation. And so then we get to the last question. At the end of our reading, we start in the book of Proverbs. It's Proverbs 1-4. How could a man who did all of this stuff still be so wise? This is, again, it's just part of how we know the Bible is true, because this is what really happened. You have this man. It's such a complex story. He inherited all of this stuff from his father. He was set up to succeed. He was given all of these things. He was given incredible wisdom, and then he threw it all away, but he still left us such a legacy. God preserved the good things that Solomon had done for future generations. And then we learn a lot from Solomon's life about how to live, and we learn a lot of Solomon's life about how not to live. And the Bible's a real story. You can't find any heroes in the Bible except for Jesus. Everybody's story has spots. And so that's what's going on here. So I hope that helps. Next week we're going to see more of Proverbs. Hope you guys have a great week. Thank you.